In this video, we're going to continue looking at various properties that you can use to style different elements. And the first thing we want to look at is doing some additional styling for links. You know that these links come as blue and underlined by default, and it gets that from the browser. So color is one of the changes that is most often used. Adding a background color to highlight the link, as if it had been highlighted with a highlighter pen, and text decoration to turn off the underline. Well, while we can style that link individually, we also can style that in different states. We do that using 4 different pseudo classes. The pseudo classes are link, which styles the links in general. Usually I don't use that, I just use a, but a::link certainly is permissible and you can use it. The visited styles it for links that have already been visited. The hover styles for when someone is hovering over the link or mousing over it, if you will. And the active styles for links that are currently active, in other words being clicked. It's that nanosecond of time where your finger goes down and back up on the mouse button. So if we take a look at a couple samples here, we just have 3 links in a list item here that we're going to go to. The important part here is what's inside of this one. And you'll see that, first of all, the anchor tags themselves are being set with the font family, the font size, and the font weight. And then we get into these pseudo classes. In the normal state, in other words, it hasn't been clicked, it's not active, there's no hover, then this is going to be a blue color, and we're going to remove the underline by text decoration none. When we visit a site or a site's been visited, we're going to change the face color to green and continue leaving the text decoration as none. That nanosecond of time is going to add an underline and change the color of the font itself. It happens so fast you're probably not going to see that. And in the hover state, when we hover over it, we're going to set the background color to a bluish gray, a medium bluish gray, and add an underline to it. So if we look at this in a browser, you can see here in Chrome that during testing here, I've actually already been to the rock site, so it's already in green. But if I hover over any of these, you'll see that they have that grayish blue background and have the underline when I hover over them. If we go to the Google website now and then go back to our page, you'll see now that we've visited Google as well, that has turned to green as well. So this gives you the opportunity to style anchor tags in various states as the user interacts with them. The hover state, the visited state are the 2 most frequently used, and just as a normal link when they're first going there, or the active part when it's actually being clicked. Backgrounds. Well, we know that CSS treats each element as its own box. So you should also then, and you can, control the background of those boxes with various properties. So we're going to look at several different properties that deal with background. The background color property just changes that color, whatever that background color is. You saw it on the hover just a few seconds ago. When we hovered over it, we changed the background color there. If you change it for the body element, it's going to affect the entire document. When it's used on any other element, it uses the specified color inside the border of the box created for that element. So it would extend to the width, include the padding, and go underneath of the border. And this value can be any valid color property that we've talked about before. So if we look at this sample here, we just have 2 paragraph tags, and one of the paragraph tags has a bold tag in it. Look at the style sheet. You can see then that first of all, our body has a background color of gray, and then we're setting the font color to black. The bold element is going to have a background color of red and have a white color. The text is going to be white. And the paragraph itself is using the RGB function to set that to the highest number, and that highest number will equate out to white. 255, 255, 255 would be white, 000 would be black. So again, we'll look at this in our browser. You can then see that the background color of the body is gray. The background color of both the paragraphs is white. And the background color of that bold tag is red, and the face color of the font is white. Well, we could also place an image in there. The background image property could be used then to do that. The property takes one value. It uses the URL function. Buck doesn't call it a function, but that's just exactly what it is. Uses the URL function that is given the argument of the path to the actual file in parentheses. The book is going to tell you to always put quotes around it, but in real life they're optional. You can have them or you don't have to have them. It'll work either way. You can use all the different types of paths we talked about, the absolute path, a root relative path, or a document path. So an example of what this might look like then would be something like this, where we're setting the background image to a URL using the root relative. It's in the images folder, and the name of it is image.gif, GIF. Keep in mind that if both the background image property as well as the background color property are used together, the background image property will take precedence. We'll look at a couple samples here, and this first one, there's not much in there because we really want to see the background image more than anything else. And you'll see we have the background image here for the body using the URL function. It's going to images/background.gif. That's the image that's going to be displayed, and the background color is a gray color. So in our browser then, you can see the image is actually just one of these. So by default, the background image is actually repeated to fill up the entire screen, something that people refer to as being wallpaper. If we look at another example and the text is all just the same, we're using a different image. It's actually a larger image, and we're setting the background color here to white as opposed to gray. And actually, just to show you, we can take off these quotes, save that, and you see the larger image then. It's still being tiled. Here's another one, here's another one. You can see the tops of the next row. It's still being tiled, but it's a larger image that's being used. And notice that even though I took the quotes out, the URL function works exactly as it's supposed to. Now, before we move off the screen, there's one thing I should mention also about using a background image with the background color. If for some reason the image doesn't show up, then that background color would take its place. Well, why wouldn't an image show up? Maybe it got deleted for some reason. Somebody was working with the files and downloaded it or deleted it by accident. But another way that it could very easily happen would be when a user who is on dial-up decides to turn images off to save on the download speed. And usually when you do use a background color with a background image, you can use a background color that matches the background color of the image itself, or at least complements your page in the same way that the background image would. There's a few other points that you should make note about how background images work. First of all, there's no way to express the intended width and height of a background image like you can with a regular image. So you need to save it at the size that you want it to appear as a background image. 2, there is no equivalent to the alt attribute either. A background image should not be used to convey any important information that you're not going to describe in the page's text as well. And then lastly, background images are often shown on the page after everything else has been rendered. So it may look to you from time to time, depending on how long it takes your page to load, what your download speed is, yada yada yada. It may appear that it's taking a long time, but it's always going to be the last thing that loads for you. Okay, we talked about the way that it repeats itself automatically. It tiles itself across the entire screen. Well, in HTML there's no way to control that, but in CSS we can. We can use the background-repeat property to control the way that those images tile. It has 4 settings. One is the repeat, which just means it's normal. It's going to repeat until it fills the screen up. The no repeat, which means that it would just be a single image. It would not repeat itself at all. The repeat X, which would repeat the image horizontally, and a repeat Y, which would repeat the image vertically. All these examples that I'm going to show you here are going to use that same page that we've been looking at. It's just one line. The only thing that's changing is it's going to tell us what we're doing, but there's nothing in the HTML we need to worry about. In our CSS for the first window, we have the background image specified, and we're going to do a repeat X, which means that this page is going to have the logos all the way across horizontally. That was the X. In our next one, we're going to repeat them with the Y factor. You can see in here then that they're all going down. And you might also notice we've been setting the background color to white. The background color of the actual image itself, as you can see, is gray. So we would probably, if we were really doing this, unless we wanted this padding, margin padding to exist, we would probably set that background color to the same as the background color of the image, as I stated before. And then the last sample is a no repeat. So it'll display it one time and that'll be it. So you can see then up in the corner, it's displayed once, does not repeat at all. And this has the proper background color to match the background color of the image itself. Now, another nice thing we can do with it is we can actually determine where it's going to show as well. Through the background position, we can determine the exact placement of that image. It takes an X and Y percentage. First one will be horizontal, the second one will be vertical positioning. It takes XY positioning, which would be any absolute length. The X again is the first one, horizontal. Y is the second value, the vertical. We'll see samples in just a second. Horizontally, we could use the keywords left, center, and right. And those would be, one of those would be the first value. And then we have vertically top, center, and bottom. That would be the second value. So every time that you see this background position, it's going to have 2 values, and those 2 values are always listed as horizontal first, vertical second. Still dealing with the same page, and you'll notice I've got quite a few in here. And as a side note, during testing, if you don't want something to be rendered on the element that you're working with, you can just put an X in front of it. You don't want to repeat it, but you want to eliminate it for working right now. Just put an X in front of it. The browser will see that and go, I have no idea what this is, and just ignore it, just like it ignores elements that it doesn't understand. So we're going to test this a couple different ways. First of all, we're going to use the positioning, the actual keywords. So it's going to be positioned to the right and on the bottom of the page the first time we look at this. So you can see it over here on the right, but you're probably expecting it to be down here. Well, that's the difference in what bottom means. The bottom is the bottom of the page, which is the bottom of the content. This, in this corner down here, This is the bottom of the window. So the end of the page is actually the end of this paragraph. So if we go back into our HTML, I'm just going to copy this line here. We'll add several in here just for the heck of it. Make sure we save it. Refresh our page. Now you see it on the right and you see it down here, which is after this last paragraph. So keep that in mind when you do something on the bottom. Let's put an X in front of this now, and we'll take the X off of the second one. So this is the XY. We're actually using absolute measurements. In this case, it's going to be 50 pixels from the left, horizontal, and 100 pixels from the top, vertical. Make sure we save that because we made changes to it. Refresh our page. And now you can see that our image is here, 50 pixels from the side, 100 pixels from the top. So you can get exactly where you want it to be. Xing that out and moving to the next one. Now we're going to do it with a percentage. This is going to be 50% of the page, 50% of the image, 20% down, 20% of the image. So if we look at this one now, make sure we save this again. It's in a position in the center of the page basically, and 20% down from the top of the page. This can be the use of percentages though can be a little tricky. As you just saw, we supplied two percentages, the horizontal and the vertical, and the percentage values align the specified percentage of the image with the percentage of the styled element. So as you can see here, when you set those percentages, it applies to the screen as well as the actual image that you're using for the background. So at 50%, it's 50% of the screen. Here we are, halfway across. It's also halfway across the image. If we're going down, it's 50% here. It's 50% of the image. If you were to use 0 percentage, it would end up in the upper left-hand corner. Several weeks back, I told you that this uppermost left-hand corner is 0. Positive values go across and down. Negative values go up and to the left. And then 100% and 100% would put it all the way down here in the bottom right-hand corner. Just another example, 80% of the screen, 80% of the image. 20% down on the screen, 20% down on the image. So keep that in mind when you're using percentages. The other cool thing we can do with this is actually fix it in place. Normally a background image on a web page is going to scroll when the visitor scrolls down the page. When you have a non-repeating image in the background, then it would scroll to the top of the page. Well, CSS has a background attachment property that has two values, fixed and scroll. Scroll is the default, and that just means that the image stays in the same place on the background of the page. As the page grows up, so goes the image. The fixed, though, says that the image does not move even if the user scrolls up and down the page. It becomes like a watermark in the middle of the page or wherever you place it, and it's always there. So if we look at 9, we just put a whole bunch of break tags in here so we had some length to this, and actually we might even want to put that in there twice just to make sure we have enough space. And then in the CSS page, we're using the background attachment, setting it to fixed, putting it in the center. Now notice that I told you first one is horizontal, the second one is vertical. If there's only one value, then that serves as both horizontal and vertical. And we have the no repeat set as well. So hopefully you can see this on the video, but here's our image here. our text doesn't go all the way down, so I'm going to resize my browser. Again, I resize my browser. It's still in the middle, but as I scroll, it stays exactly where it's supposed to. Does not move. So someone could use their logo as a watermark and it would always be on the page no matter what. If we go back to our CSS, then we'll set the value to scroll. Save that. Refresh our page. First thing you should notice is that it dropped. Why? Because center is in the not the center of what's being viewed anymore, but it's in the center of the content. And you can see then as I scroll here, it stays in the same place and moves with it. And then we have a shorthand for the background. After you have the background property, you could add values then for the color, image, attachment, as well as position. You would end up with something that would look like this. Background colon. This would be a white background. The URL would be myimage.gif. It's going to scroll for the background attachment. It's going to be center horizontal, top vertical, and it's not going to repeat. And again, you do not have to use all the values. You can use one or any combination of the values. If any value is not there, then it just reverts to its normal behavior. Now we're going to take a look at lists. The first thing of note is that we can change the type of marker with the list style type. Again, bullet point or the number, whatever you want to call it, it's really referred to as a marker. For unordered list, you have the value of none, which means no marker, a disk, which is the default, a filled in circle, a circle, which is an empty circle, and a square, which is a filled in square. And for the ordered list, you've got some that we could have with HTML using the type, but we have some additional ones. So all total we have decimals, which is just numbers, decimal leading zeros, which is numbers with a 0 in front of it, so when you got to 10 you would only have 2 digits. Lower alpha or lower Latin, that's typo, it should be Latin, not Latin. Uppercase alpha, upper Latin, lower Roman, upper Roman, and we even have the opportunity to use Greek, Armenian, and Georgian if you want to. We also have the opportunity to determine where it's going to be with the list style position. It determines whether the marker is actually outside or inside of the box that contains the main points. There's two values. The inside, the marker is actually placed in the block of text, which is indented, and it also means that if the text wraps for any reason, it'll wrap underneath of the marker. The outside is the default, where the marker sits to the left of the block of text. So we're looking at a sample here. You can see we just have two lists. We have an unordered list, and then we have an ordered list, and they both have one list item, which is a long piece of text. In our style sheet then, on the unordered list, we're using the outside, and on the ordered list, we're using the inside. Now, just looking at it like this, first of all, this is the normal indent. And you can see on that one that the bullet or marker is outside. Again, we have the normal indent and then the marker. Better way of looking at this would be if we change the size of the browser window, and then you can see that the indentation of both lists is the same, and when you get to the second one here, the marker is there, and when the text wraps, it wraps underneath of it. Where on the outside, which is the default, it always stays to the outside, and the indentation is smooth on the text. The last thing for list is the list style image. If you don't like any of the markers that are available through CSS, you can have your own. The syntax is similar to the background image property in that you use the URL function and pass the path of the image as an argument to it. So if we look at this example, first of all, we just have an unordered list. It has 3 list items in it that we're going to use. And then for our UL, our list style image, here we're looking in the images folder for the bullet point GIF. So in the browser then, instead of having disks or squares or whatever, you can see that we have the Rocks logo as our marker or our list style image. And then lastly, we have the list style property. This is just a way to express one or more of the properties that we looked at all at one time. They should appear in the order of type, position, and then the image. If you would have the type, then you probably wouldn't have the image on the end. If you had the image, you probably wouldn't have the type. Either way, if you had an image and type, the image would overrule the type. So you're liable to see something like this as a shortcut that would allow you then to do both of these, set the type as well as the position without having to use 2 properties, doing it with just 1 property.